I absolutely love NFL films, as I feel so lucky that they have been in existence since 1962. Then beginning in 2011, NFL Films began a series entitled A Football Life, in which I thoroughly enjoyed with all the old unique footage, mic'd up moments, and tremendous in-depth information. But there are 2 episodes I hope they would produce that I want to see greatly. For this video, I want to talk about how much I wish a Jerry Glanville Football Life episode would be made. And then in another video, I'll mention the other A Football Life episode I greatly want to see. But for this video, I want to talk about some items and memories about Jerry Glanville from my point of view while being a huge NFL fan back in the day. And also, Jerry Glanville, he doesn't have the football resume to be given great consideration, but it's a Football Life episode I need. So I grew up loving football in the late 80s and 90s. So I experienced a lot of the craziness associated with Jerry Glanville, but there is so much more I want to learn about, along with the old footage and mic'd up moments. Furthermore, I'd be very fascinated in hearing what other players and coaches would have to say about one of the most interesting NFL characters. If this episode was ever made, the younger generation might be questioning if all the items associated with Jerry Glanville really did happen, or if they're being trolled by NFL Films. Jerry Glanville's personality was so different with his twang, his stories, and flamboyancy. I'm sure there's so much footage that people have never seen to show the craziness associated with Jerry Glanville. The 3 things I think most people would associate with the quirky coach would be his mic'd up moment where he said to an official, "This isn't college, this is the NFL," which stands for not for long when you make them calls. The next item is Glanville leaving tickets for Elvis despite the singer and actor being gone for more than a decade. This I'll talk about more later on. And lastly, Glanville, he had quite a memorable post-game handshake with Chuck Noll, and that's where I want to start. So Glanville, he got his first NFL head coaching job with the Houston Oilers in the mid-80s. And in the late 80s, I became an Oilers fan. Loved their ultra-aggressive blitzing defense installed by Glanville. And I remember seeing on a Monday Night Football promo with the Oilers as they were showing the defense with some intense hits and one guy body slamming a running back or something like that. The Oilers, they had quite the reputation for being brash and really playing hard with an edge with accusations of cheap shots and late hits. So, you have Jerry Glanville, an extremely flamboyant character, the head coach of a rough team. And then there's Pittsburgh's head coach, Chuck Noll, a person who is so stoic and always in control and never loses his composure, as many see Noll as a class act. But then, after a game, Chuck Noll wanted to stick up for his team and confronted Glanville harshly with some foul language about how the Oilers play. I then really knew something was up with this team and this coach. But I was a young football fan, didn't really know everything that was going on with the AFC Central at the time, as I learned later on that the other coaches in that division couldn't stand Glanville, as I'm talking about Noll with Pittsburgh, Sam Weish with Cincinnati, who once ran up the score on the Oilers, and then Marty Schottenheimer with the Browns, who has one of my favorite mic'd up moments of all time saying, "You can take that blitz and stick it up your..." Jerry Glanville. Sadly, those 3 coaches who I mentioned have all passed away. May they rest in peace. But I really want to learn more and see footage about how everyone in the AFC Central despised Jerry Glanville. But after Houston, the craziness would still continue. So after a stint with the Oilers, Glanville, he became the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, where he once was a defense coordinator from 1979 to 1982. But this is where I really remember the wacky coach. So to begin, I'm pretty sure it was CBS, but CBS had a segment on the pregame show showing the Falcons practice with their new head coach, and from what I remember, it started out with this black racing car or something, parking, and out was this man with black cowboy boots, black shades, a black cowboy hat, a black jacket, and black pants, just walking methodically to the practice field, as this didn't look like a head football coach of an NFL team. It looked more like an actor coming out of the dressing room, walking onto the wrong set. After that Glanville boss intro, what I remember next were the Falcons players in a circle with the players in the middle, sumo wrestling or something like that, as I just thought it was so strange. So the coach that loved to wear black, who once said something like black isn't a color, it's an attitude, who was being liked by me. But later on, I kind of understood why he wasn't much liked by others, as my appreciation for Glanville declined, as I'll talk about this more later on. But anyways, my dad thought there was something wrong with me for being a Jerry Glanville fan, as I loved his blitzing defense and he'd run the run and shoot offense in Atlanta, and my dad would always diss me for saying, "How could you like a coach who leaves tickets for Elvis for every game?" So that was a huge part of Jerry Glanville's unique persona, was leaving tickets for Elvis for every game. Now that always stuck with me, and I'm sure for many NFL fans in the 90s, But then on an episode of The Rich Eisen Show, Glanville said he only did it once for a preseason game in Memphis. But nonetheless, I love that lore. They left tickets for Elvis every game, as that's what I think most NFL fans thought back then. For some reason, I felt he did it more than once. But also, Glanville said the Falcons made mention at their Falcons Hall of Fame building or something like that Glanville left tickets for Elvis after every game, as Glanville said that was wrong. But moving on to the 1991 Atlanta Falcons, Glanville's most successful season in the ATL, and there's been videos made about this team, one entitled the Rudest team ever, as I'm not going to go too much into it, but to shortly put it, it was a crazy season. You saw MC Hammer and Evander Holyfield on the sidelines, but for me the wildest thing about this team is that when they would make an interception, their goal was to score, as they do laterals to try to accomplish that. So, what's crazy was for the wildcard game against the rivals New Orleans Saints, in which they did win, but the Falcons, they got a very late interception. All they had to do was go down and the game would be essentially over. But this is the Jerry Glanville Falcons, as nothing would be normal. In fact, when Glanville, he became the defensive coordinator in the CFL for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, they would practice laterals after an interception. As Glanville, he said, if we get a pick, we're going to lateral it and try to score a touchdown on the pick. You've got some risk involved in it, but if we do it enough, these kids will learn how to do it and we'll score on it. Now, there are more items like we talked about with Glanville and the Falcons, including a situation in his relationship with Brett Favre. But anyways, Glanville's last season in Atlanta was in 1993, and then he went on to broadcasting, and I enjoyed listening to him. My father, not so much, still talking smack to me about how can you like someone who leaves tickets for Elvis, but he would also do radio appearances, as I'd enjoy listening to him speak and hearing his stories. And one story that was kind of memorable for me, but it was also one that I felt bad for a player. But anyways, for a game at halftime, Glanville, he gave a player $20 to take the bus to go home, as he was caught right there. And he did it because he said that player wouldn't hit anyone. Glanville, he'd also talk on the radio how he would get into fights after school. And also when he was a color commentator, he said something that I heard from a sports radio station, as this sounds so much like Glanville. But the saying that was associated with Glanville is that when a player gets his helmet knocked off, the first thing you do is check to see if there is not a head in the helmet, then you can continue to play. But the last thing I want to mention is to get to the reason why my Jerry Glanville fandom decreased, which had to do with him being the defensive coordinator with the Hawaii Warriors. I forgot exactly which game it was, but I was watching a Hawaii college football game sometime in the mid-2000s when Glanville was a DC and June Jones was a head coach, as those two have a long working relationship together, two very different personalities. But anyways, when I was watching this Hawaii football game, it was very disruptive and very exhausting to watch, because it seemed every time when Glanville's defense would make a tackle, the defensive player or players would be continuously standing over the player that they tackled, and they'd be talking so much smack and keep chirping continuously way too much. As this seemed to be for every play as watching this game, as I began to think and understand why those AFC Central coaches did not like Glanville at all. So, that's just a brief summary of me growing up and experiencing Jerry Glanville in the NFL and in college football. I would just love if they ever made a football life Jerry Glanville. He was quite the character, quirky, unique, and controversial. Those who were huge football fans of teams in the AFC Central back in the day during the Glanville Oilers days, let me know what you think about Glanville in the comment section, as I'd really like to know what those AFC Central days were like. And if you weren't a fan of those AFC Central teams back then, I'd also like to hear from you. But I need a football life, Jerry Glanville. Thank you so much for all the support. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and if you're interested, there's a Patreon link below to support this channel. Thank you so much.